Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our May 10th council meeting. We'll go ahead and get started with an invocation, which we observe by a moment of silence. And then we'll follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Agent.
Here.
Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Willets. Here. Woodings.
Here.
All present.
Thanks. And next up, we have council minutes for approval from May 3rd.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the council minutes for the work session and the regular evening meeting of May 3rd, 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Willets.
We see you saying yes.
Woodings. Yes. Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thanks. Next up, we will move to the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk, are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Willets.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Now we'll move on to ordinances. We don't have anything in first, second, third, but we do have two under, we have a second and a third reading ordinance.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that all rules of the council interfering with the immediate consideration of ORD 2222 be suspended and that portions of Idaho Code 90 or 5902 requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with, and the records show that it has been read for the 3rd time in full in order to meet a DEQ deadline.
Second. We have a motion and a second, clerk?
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Willets.
Yes.
Woodings. Yes. Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 22-22, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 10, Chapter 5, Section 10-5-7, 10-5-17-2, and 10-5-27 to add maximum allowable industrial loadings to each of the water renewal facilities, to add information to be included on data disclosure forms for indirect discharge permits, to add a term to indirect discharge permit, to add records retention for best management practices, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of ordinance 2222.
Second. We have a motion and a second, clerk?
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Willets.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And next up, we'll move to first, second, and third reading.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that rules of the council interfering with the immediate consideration of ordinance 2322 be suspended and that the portions of Idaho Code 5902 requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with, and the records show that it has been read for the 3rd time in full.
Second. We have a motion and a second, clerk?
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Willets.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 23-22, an ordinance CAR 21-00011 for property located at 1833 South Fennell Street, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance from R-1A to R-1B DA, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that ordinance 2322 be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, clerk?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thanks. And now we will move on to subdivisions under new business. First up, we have the SUB 21-58. We got David Mosier, welcome, presenting, and then Becky McKay for the applicant. Nobody signed up in advance to testify on this item. Oh, your mic's.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The applicant is requesting the preliminary plat for the Box Elder subdivision was approved by the Boise City Council on August 31st, 2021, and included 18 buildable lots and 4 common lots. The applicant is now requesting approval of the final plat, which is in conformance with the design and layout of the approved preliminary plat. At the preliminary plat hearing, council expressed concerns of the loss of mature trees on site and requested the applicant explore opportunities to install an unimproved pathway comprised of a gravel surface or similar material adjacent to the farmer's lateral irrigation canal. In addition, the pathway will be installed with the subdivision and no healthy or desirable trees should be removed during its construction. To address these concerns, the applicant performed a tree survey of the subject property and developed a tree mitigation plan. The tree mitigation plan will protect one existing healthy tree within the landscape buffer, but it was required to remove several mature trees located within the proposed right-of-way. To mitigate for the loss of these trees, the applicant will plant 59 trees at 2.5-inch caliper on site for a total of 146.5 caliper inches, which complies with the requirements of our landscape ordinance for tree mitigation. And as you can see from the landscape plan, this includes a substantial tree plantings within the landscape buffer, the common lots, and 2 trees per buildable lot. As for the pathway, the applicant is showing a gravel path along the irrigation easement and a connection to the pathway on the south side or southeast side of the development. In addition, Napa Meridian Irrigation stated they would allow the pathway within the irrigation easement, provided the applicant makes certain improvements to the site, which includes very specific fencing along the irrigation canal and the removal of all the existing trees along the irrigation canal. As such, the applicant is requesting not to install the pathway and to save these trees. However, the planning team recommends the pathway be installed since the irrigation district could remove the trees at any time along the lateral. In conclusion, the planning team recommends approval, or the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval of the subdivision. Thank you.
Any
Madam Mayor.
questions for staff?
David, so, and I'll ask the applicant the same things because you may not know the answer, but if the irrigation district can remove these trees at any time, why are they requiring the applicant to do it? Is that just for the cost savings for them?
Madam Mayor, members of the commission, or council, I would suspect that is the reason why.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? All right. Go ahead and there's one question that maybe you can refer to.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, I'm Becky McKay with Engineering Solutions, 1029 North Rosario and Meridian. I'm representing the applicant on this particular final plat that's before you. This particular project, it's small in stature with 4.2 acres of infill and just 18 buildable lots. There were 2 things that the existing neighbors asked of us when we did our neighborhood meeting. One, they asked that we replace their existing dilapidated wood fencing all along the eastern boundary, which we told them that we would do that. And that is at a cost of $20,000. Secondly, the neighbors to the west on the other side of the farmer's lateral asked that we retain the trees that are along the farmer's lateral. There are significant number of trees along that lateral. It's kind of hard to count because they're all, there's kind of bunches of them. I counted probably about 30. As you can see from this picture, there's a wall of trees that are along that farmer's lateral. We were asked by the council to hire an arborist. The arborist did go out, evaluated all of the on-site trees, and did make a recommendation. His recommendation was, he classified the trees, indicated what trees we need to mitigate for, and he stated in his report, whereas the trees along the canal bank on the west side probably should be left. And that's because they have a riparian value. And that's what the neighbors that are on my western boundary said. You have no idea how much waterfowl are there. It's beautiful. And it's lovely, and it'll be a buffer between us and your new subdivision, and we want you to retain it. And we said, we will. So when the city council said, well, we would like you to build a pathway along the canal, I contacted Greg Curtis, the director at Nampa Meridian Irrigation District. And at first he said no, because that's not part of the pathway agreement between the city of Boise and Nampa Meridian. The agreement deals with specific drains, not live laterals. And he says, until Boise comes to me and we make an addendum to that agreement, I'm not going to allow any pathways. Then he said, well, if they're making it a condition of you, he said, I'll make one exception, but if you put the pathway in, you shall remove every single tree along the bank. Because if you disturb it, I want all the trees gone. Now, a lot of them are very mature. They've been there for many years. Nampa Meridian maintains the facility on the west side, so they really don't conflict. The other thing he said he would require of me is he said, I know you're putting wrought iron on the rear of your lot lines, but that's a live ditch and that's a liability to the city. And it's not part of our Boise City agreement indemnifying us. So I want you to build another wrought iron fence at the top of bank after you strip all the vegetation and trees out. To build another wrought iron fence is going to cost $28,000. So I already have to build a $25,000 wrought iron fence on my western boundary. Then I have to do double fence, and it has to be slotted so they can remove panels in the event that they needed to access that canal because it is a live ditch. So it's like the cost has just ballooned up. One of the things the council asked me when I came through as a preliminary, we have attached sidewalk next to Overland Road. And they said, you know, could you widen that? Could you do a detached walk? We did work with ACHD. We are cutting out the existing sidewalk and the vertical curb. We're going to replace the vertical curb, and I am detaching the sidewalk within our 35-foot landscape buffer. So that cost to accommodate the wishes to make it more pedestrian friendly along that overland corridor is $22,000. So for a little project, the dollars are really adding up. And I know, you know, I get lectured everywhere I go. Why can't you guys do more affordable housing? You know, we need you to help us. I guess I'm coming before you saying we need you to help us, because for every dollar that we spend, it makes the value, you know, the price of these lots, the price of these homes. I did kind of bring a copy of our plan, and I'd like to show that to you. In yellow, you can see we have a pedestrian path we're constructing down to the farmer's lateral. Then we're building sidewalk all the way north up to Overland, and then building a new detached sidewalk. The gravel pathway we're talking about, where we'd be destroying all of those trees in that riparian area, is just on the rear of these lots, which doesn't make any sense to me from a planning perspective when we are basically creating a pedestrian network with our sidewalks. So I would ask the council, in the conditions of approval that are attached to our staff report, items site-specific number 3, to delete that we not be required to install that pathway, because we'll have to tear out all those trees and do double wrought iron fencing. Condition 4, you guys asked me to construct a pathway east of lot 21. That pathway is in a separate lot, so it'd be within lot 22. So I just need a modification there. Item 5, we are complying with the council's request to do the 8-foot landscape and detached walk within our buffer. And then item 6 would be deleted because we would not be widening the existing walk. We're taking it out. And then as far as the existing trees, we did submit from a licensed arborist and horticulturist an evaluation of all the trees. And so my client will be planting 2.5-inch caliper, 2 for every lot, because it's such a small project. We couldn't put all of the mitigation trees in our open space. So we'll be planting those on each lot. So I feel that we're going above and beyond and doing what we can to obviously achieve the vision that the council has. And I'd ask that you support us in these modifications of the conditions. Am I answering questions?
Yeah, thank you. You actually answered a couple of my questions in your presentation, which were, are there sidewalks internal to the project? Which you said, yes, there are.
Yes.
The emergency access can also be pedestrian access to Overland.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Do you, if we were removing the requirement for the pathway along the irrigation canal, do you think it would still be necessary to have site-specific condition number 4 with the connection between Surf Street and then the pathway along the farmer's lateral irrigation canal? I'm not sure what that access would do.
That goes to the south.
Yeah.
So it would just be construct the pedestrian pathway within lot 22. So in the drawing I showed you, this is lot 22.
Right.
So
Madam Mayor.
that creates a connection to property owned by Boise City that's to the south
Oh, okay.
for connection to a future pathway that has never been built.
Okay,
So
great.
that's lot 22. But when I came through as a preliminary, we did not have a separate lot there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
question of staff, and Becky, if you have a comment, feel free to add. Did we, as a city, send anyone to talk to Nampa Meridian to discuss the potential changes that would need to be made to accommodate this? John Rowland, I'm thinking of, for instance.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I actually did meet with with Napa Meridian before the first preliminary or actually after the first preliminary plat was reviewed by the council, along with members of the planning team who were working on our pathways master plan at the time. They were understood what was necessary. I don't know what type of follow-up happened after that. But we did meet it and they did express that this could be done, but some changes to our memorandum of understanding with them would have to be adjusted.
So, Madam Mayor, if I could follow up then with Becky, if we would decide to delete condition 4, is there still the room behind the wrought iron fences that you'll be installing to put a pathway if we can reach an agreement with Nampa Meridian?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Clegg, we would still retain condition 2, which says that we will record a pedestrian easement on that lot 23. So to answer your question, yes, that is a 60-foot easement for the farmer's lateral, 40 to the west and 20 on our side. So yes, we'd provide the easement. We just would not install the gravel pathway. Thereby, we would be allowed to leave the trees, according to Greg Curtis. And he did send me an email, which I did submit to staff.
So I guess follow-up question to that, the lots on the west side of the road to the east of the canal, are they deep enough that you could widen the easement in that particular along there by 5 or 10 feet, which might give us more room to work with Meridian Farm with the irrigation district?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Clegg, those lots are
I don't see dimensions on this one. I'm not the
yeah,
one that has
if we
dimensions.
look at the final plat, those lots range from about 101 feet all the way down to 83.92. Because that farmer's lateral kind
Yeah,
of jogs through there. I've got some lots that have depth to them, but I have some that have no depth to spare. But like I said, I have that entire farmer's lateral easement in a separate lot.
mhm.
And then we would do a blanket easement over lot 23
Yeah,
for if there were an opportunity. But like I said, you have the sidewalk network, which, is obviously going to provide that north-south connection from the southern point of our project and the farmer's lateral up to Overland.
yeah. Yeah, it does. And if you're looking at it just as a sidewalk network, that makes sense. Our pathways plan is looking to create both recreational and connectivity. And of course, the sidewalk isn't nearly as recreational, so we would be losing that. So final question, within that 20 feet, if they weren't requiring you to remove the trees, would putting a pathway on that side of the ditch in that easement disturb the roots of the trees that are existing? Or is that just something that they've decided they want to do? They must think it's going to disturb them, but I can't imagine that it will.
The irrigation districts, they're typically not tree friendly. However, we do get a lot of volunteer trees that mature, and some people plant trees along them. And so if it doesn't disrupt with their maintenance, they don't bother them.
Mhm.
But when we come in as a development team and we're building pathways, then they force us to take out all the trees. I've had to do this on drains in multiple municipalities. And of course, when we take out the trees, that heats up the water.
Yeah,
And water temperature in the Boise River is a big issue, and all of the water ends up, from the canals to the drains to the Boise River. So, from a planning perspective, we're trying to retain those trees and vegetation. Sometimes we plant trees outside the easements. As far as the waterway, I think you've got ample room if you want to build a pathway in the future, because the top of bank looks like it's running right at our boundary. So you still have 20 feet, but we've got a lot of trees, through there. And I did bring some pictures to kind of give you guys an idea. And Nampa Meridian said, all of our ditch riders go on the east side. So the trees don't hamper them at this time. But if I touch their easement, I've got to remove every single.
oh, I understand that. You've said that 100
Okay.
times. You don't need to say that again. Answer my question. If we change condition number 2 to say a public pedestrian access easement shall be recorded on common lot 23, would you be agreeable to that?
No. Oh, yes. 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 If we just grant an easement in lot 23, just as item
But
2 is
state
written.
that it's a public one, because we've got other easements in other places and the HOAs are saying, no, that's only ours and nobody else can use it.
Yes, we agree to that.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a question for David.
Great.
David, I'm a little bit confused and I can't remember the first time we saw this. Is this canal part of the overall pathways plan that we just developed, or is it not part of that?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it is noted on the pathways plan.
Oh, it is. Okay, great. Thank you.
Right, any further questions?
Madam Mayor, just to be clear, from Council President Clegg, what we're saying is that we wouldn't require them to build the extra fence. We would be allowing them to keep the trees, but we would be requiring a public easement. So it would save the money that you're talking about as far as the construction of the extra fence and the expense of removing the trees.
Yeah.
But the property and the easement would remain. And then, Madam Mayor, I guess just a quick follow-up to make sure that I'm completely clear in understanding. It's not that the construction of the path itself will call for the removal of the trees. It's that they're adding this onto it. Like the construction of the path itself the trees aren't in the way. The trees are on the other side. This is just something that they're asking you to do in addition, in order for us to get the pathway. That's correct.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Halliburton, yet that they are making that a condition of approval. If I disturb their easement, yes.
Great, thank you.
So it seems to me that this proposal of public easement that you agreed to it buys us time and saves the opportunity to address the pathway
Mhm.
in a different manner, but get the same thing in the long run.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Anything further? Nobody's here to testify. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down the public hearing.
So Madam Mayor, I move approval of Box Elder Creek subdivision SUB 21-00058, Boise City final plat with following changes to the site-specific conditions. Condition number 2 will now read: a pedestrian or a public pedestrian access easement shall be recorded on Common Lot 23 adjacent to the farmers and lateral irrigation canal. Condition number 4 will now read: construct a pedestrian pathway within lot 22, which provides a connection between Surf Street and the pedestrian pathway along the farmers lateral irrigation canal. And we will remove condition number 6 as it is no longer needed with the addition of the detached sidewalk as per condition number 5.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
I just have a question for the motion maker of the motion. Did you also note that we were removing condition number 3 in your original motion?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, and remove condition number 3 as well.
And the seconder
Yep,
agrees.
agreed. Second.
Great. All right, with that, clerk, will you call the roll?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Puddings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And David Mosier is back with us for CAR 21-47. Ben Semple. Ben, are you online?
Madam Mayor, Ben is online.
Great, okay. And then we don't expect Sina to attend, Fred Fritchman, but Sina, if you're here, please, oh, Ben, you're muted. We can't hear you. Sina, if you're here, please raise your hand. But at this point, is anybody in the room here to testify on this topic? Great, didn't think so. If anybody online is here to testify on this, go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. We'll call you. But this looks as though it might just be David Mosier and Ben Semple at this point.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The applicant is requesting a rezone from R1C to R2D located at 2314 South Broadway Avenue, and a preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 17 buildable lots and 1 common lot on approximately 1.14 acres. A conditional use permit for a planned residential development containing 17 units was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission on March 7th, 2022, and was not appealed. As such, only the rezone and the subdivision are before council tonight. And as you can see from the aerial photograph, the neighborhood is a mix of residential uses, which includes single-family, duplex, and multifamily developments to the west, with office and commercial uses along Broadway Avenue. As seen on this slide, the requested R2 zone is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, since the adjacent properties are zoned R1C to the west and north, and commercial and office zoning are to the east and south. It is also compatible with the comprehensive plan, as it designates the site as mixed use on the land use map, within which the proposed R2 is allowed and anticipated. As you can see from the site plan here, the development consists of 15 attached 3-story townhomes and 2 detached single-family homes on 1.14 acres. The project design includes protecting the existing historic single-family house on the property. The development consists of 3 groups of 5 attached townhomes, 2 of which will be oriented towards Melrose. There's an additional new 2-story single-family house along the north property line, and as already noted, the existing historic house will be protected on site. With conditions, the project will comply with all tree mitigation requirements. Several neighbors did express concerns with the project in terms of compatibility and traffic with the surrounding neighborhood. And as discussed by the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, the project is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, and there is traffic capacity on the adjacent road to support the project. In summary, with the approved PUD, the proposed preliminary plat complies with all the requirements of the development code. In conclusion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the rezone in the subdivision. Thank you.
Any questions?
Madam Mayor, David, just a comment. It was really helpful to have the tree mitigation study actually list out each of the trees and what type they were and what the caliper was, so that we could see in a very detailed way what was being proposed. So just a note in the future, I imagine they do that for most of these studies, but we don't typically get to see it. And it was very helpful for me. Thank you.
All right. Ben, welcome. Good to see you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you for having me. And I want to thank David for his presentation of the project. He did a good job encapsulating that. I wanted to state that we are in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report. I did want to clarify condition 3, where it states that Broadway Avenue shall be improved with a 5-foot detached sidewalk with an 8-foot landscape buffer. A portion of the detached sidewalk, we're detaching 10 feet, which is the standard for ACHD and ITD to allow for the class 1 trees that we're proposing, as that there are overhead power lines along the west side of Broadway, which would require us to have class 1 trees. So about 2/3 of the length of Broadway will have that detached 5-foot sidewalk. As you approach the intersection of Melrose and Broadway, there are some existing, probably 70-foot tall catalpas that we want to save on the property. So we're proposing to bring the sidewalk back to attach to the curb, but we would be providing a 7-foot wide attached sidewalk and then detaching it again as we get to the intersection so that we can push the pedestrian ramp further from Broadway, just to give a little bit more pedestrian comfort at that intersection. All of the sidewalk along Melrose will be detached 8 feet and be a 5-foot sidewalk and have class 2 street trees along there. Detaching the sidewalk at that corner also helps us avoid a power pole, fire hydrant, and an existing irrigation structure that's there that delivers water along Broadway. Per the conditions of approval and what David had stated, we'll fully mitigate for any of the trees that are removed. I'm also in conversations with the Treasure Valley Tree or Treasure Valley Canopy Network and their group of kind of urban timber harvest guys, that so we can find some stuff that is on the site that would be capable of being harvested for use in other projects rather than just being cut down and turned into firewood. So even though we are mitigating fully, some of that also won't just be cut down. I did want to point out that we'll mitigate for the 195 inches being removed, but we are retaining 228 inches of trees on the site on top of the mitigation trees we're planting. And you know, with that, we're really excited about the project. It does have a historic home on it. It was designed by Turtelot before Turtelot and Hummel became an architecture firm in Boise, and that is the firm that designed the state capitol building as well as multiple other buildings in this or in our city. And the home itself has some river rock veneer on it. It was river rock that actually was brought from the Boise River to this home and placed on the front. So we do not anticipate doing much to the exterior of that existing home other than cleaning it up and removing anything that's damaged. But we are working with the architect and developer and builder will be looking at how to replace that with the same historic materials and really retain that historic character of the home, which is again why we also didn't do any development between the home and Broadway, so that can always have a view into that, because it's a really great home. I'm sure everyone has driven by there and seen that house. It's really impressive, some of the architectural details on it. And with that, I would stand for any additional questions.
Madam Mayor. Ben, thank you for your notes about that house. When I saw the big yellow sheet up on the house, I was like, no, they can't tear down the house. It is such a special place and very beautiful, and I think worthy of preservation. And I really appreciate the density that's built into the remaining land that's there. I think it really maximizes the site in a nice way. My question is, are the townhomes going to be a for sale product, or are they intended for rentals, or what's the kind of end game there?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, these would be for sale. They will be on fee simple lots. So, you know, a family could purchase one. It doesn't preclude someone from purchasing some as an investment property, but yes, they will all be for sale, including the existing home that's being renovated. That would be resold as a single family residence as well. So yeah, we're really excited about that house. It is on the National Historic Registry. Also, I've done some, had some conversations with the State Historic Preservation Office and Preservation Idaho, and they're really excited about it not coming down. Contrary to belief, you can actually demolish buildings that are on the National Historic Registry, and so being able to be a part of a project that retains that and really improves it and gets another family back there was exciting for us.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Ben, thank you for the hard work you did on identifying which trees could be saved. I also appreciate the partnership with the Urban Wood Network and salvaging and harvesting rather than wasting the trees that can't. I think you answered my question on this sidewalk. It was interesting to me to see how it angled back to Broadway and then away. But as I looked at the aerial map, it seems to line up with the same kind of a configuration on the sidewalk across the street at the credit union. And so my question to you, are in fact those going to line up so that in the future, if we wanted to put a pedestrian crossing there, it would work at a 90-degree?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, yeah, I do believe that where that's attached, it does line up almost directly across from that angle where I'm looking at the aerial photo right now as well, where that comes across the street. It's really right in front of those three large catalpas that are on the corner.
Right.
By getting that away from the sidewalk at the corner, there's now one of those pedestrian ramps that they used to install that kind of makes you go towards the road at the intersection. So by replacing that, it also really drastically improves safety there.
Yeah, it does. I appreciate that. So just to clarify, what you'd like as an amendment to the condition 3 is that you will be required to do a detached sidewalk, but allowed to deviate from that on the southern portion of the lot to avoid taking out the 3 trees. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, yes, in essence, that's what we're asking for. I also just wanted to clarify that we are doing a 10-foot planter strip and not 8-foot.
And not an 8-foot?
ACHD requires 10-foot planter strip for class 1 trees.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is the neighborhood association here? Nope. Anybody out here to testify on this? All right. Ben, I'm imagining you have nothing to rebut since nothing's been said since you spoke. Great. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing then.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve let's see, first we have to do the rezone, I think. That we approve CAR 21-47 Rodney Evans Partners, 2315 South Broadway Avenue, a rezone from R1C to R2D at 2314 South Broadway.
Second.
Madam Mayor. Point of order, is it 2314 or is it 2315?
Well, that's why I read them both, and I was going to question that.
Madam Mayor, members of the council,
Yeah.
the rezone on is greater because we're including the half street section and rezoning that as well.
Okay,
All right. We have a motion, a second. Oh, wait. Did something need to?
2315 is the address.
okay. The rezone will be on 2315 South Broadway.
Great. Any further discussion? Clerk?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I move that we approve Wyeth Acres subdivision SUB 21-63 Boise City preliminary plat at 2315 South Broadway for 17 buildable lots and 1 common lot with the following change in condition 3 to read that Broadway Avenue improvements shall include a 5-foot detached sidewalk with a 10-foot landscape buffer, with the exception of the southern end of that sidewalk, which will be allowed to be attached to Broadway to avoid removing the mature trees at that end, as shown on the site plan, and that that buffer shall include the installation of Class 1 trees. And staff can certainly play with the language on that, but
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All right, clerk?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we will move on. Oh, Josh, you are here. I hadn't seen you. Now we'll move on to DRH 21-510. An appeal at 1502 West Heron Street. We've got Josh and then the applicant, appellant, Lawrence Pat Pulliam. Welcome. Kate Henwood from Nina. So are you here for this one? Kate, is someone from Nina online?
Madam Mayor, we have no one online.
Okay, oh, nobody at all? Alrighty, well, we'll check back, but we'll hear from Josh, then the applicant. And then we'll see if we've got Nina, and otherwise we'll open up to the public.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So the item before you tonight is an appeal of the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of an appeal regarding conditions placed on an administrative certificate of appropriateness to remove an existing tree in the North End Historic District. So the subject property is located at the northwest corner of Heron Street and 15th Street, approximately 2 blocks north of Washington Elementary School. The existing residence was determined to be non-contributing to the North End Historic District in a survey completed in 1998. So the subject application was an administrative certificate of appropriateness to remove for the retroactive approval to remove an existing tree. It was a 36-inch Siberian elm tree in the rear yard of the subject property, indicated with an X on the aerial photo here. Removal of trees in the historic districts do require an administrative certificate of appropriateness application prior to removing the tree. The former location of the tree can be seen here in the photo indicated with the arrow from the street, and photos are also included of the stump and portions of the tree that were left after the tree was removed. In the application materials, a letter from their tree removal service indicated the tree was a hazard and had compromised limbs due to wind damage. Requirements for mitigating trees are based on multiple factors, including the size, health and condition of the tree, and location. For instance, a tree that is diseased or planted very close to a structure and actively damaging the structure would not likely require any mitigation at all. However, this tree was removed prior to a proper evaluation of the tree being performed, and therefore it's very difficult to understand the actual condition of the tree. Based on that, mitigation was required per the ordinance, which, as you've heard previously tonight, it's equal caliper inches. So 1 caliper inch of tree removed is replaced with 1 caliper inch of tree. So in this circumstance, a 36-inch caliper tree would require mitigation of either 36 inches on site or payment to the tree mitigation fund equal to the value of 36 inches. The applicant submitted an appeal to that administrative approval, and that was taken before the Historic Preservation Commission to challenge that condition of approval. So at their hearing of February 28, 2022, the Historic Preservation Commission did deny the appeal with a vote of 3-2. They found that sufficient evidence did not exist that the tree met the standards of the residential historic guidelines, which require that trees are diseased, dying, or present a safety hazard to be removed without mitigation, and therefore did just stick with staff's condition of approval requiring 36 inches of mitigation. They did deliver in their deliberations. I'm sorry, they did discuss that they felt that 36 inches was perhaps excessive, but did not have an alternate number to fall back on or the expertise required to determine what appropriate mitigation would be. So subsequently, the applicant appealed the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of that appeal and is before you tonight. As a reminder, in order to modify or reverse the decision of the Historic Preservation Commission, council must find error in their decision based on the standards in ordinance. Upon doing so, the conditions of approval could be modified. Alternately, if no error is found, then the commission's decision would be upheld. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
just one clarification. It's not just mitigate by planting or mitigate by paying. It could also be a combination, right? They could plant 24 inches on site and pay for 12.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajan, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
Josh, question about the mitigation into the tree fund. The numbers that we see in the record here indicate about $400 per caliper inch, which seems awfully high to me. And I wonder, does that number include then both the planting and the administration of figuring out how to plant the trees that might be used to mitigate?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, yes, I believe that's correct, that tree mitigation number does include some administrative and costs that would require to obtain a tree and plant it rather than just the straight cost of a tree.
Okay, and follow up if I may. Is there, do we have a standard schedule for how we decide how much that will be?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, we do not. Forestry advises us on those dollar amounts.
Okay, thank you.
Further question?
I guess one other, Madam Mayor. My understanding is that mitigation can occur offsite without payment as well, right? Is there a path or an avenue to plant 36 inches of tree in the city of Boise, not on the subject property without paying into the tree fund?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajan, I believe that's correct. Yes.
Okay.
My understanding is forestry is pretty flexible on how this can be accommodated, and actual planting of trees, whether it was just a payment, it's kind of half dozen of one and six of the other if they pay for the trees or provide the trees to be planted. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we will hear from the appellant.
Madam Mayor, Councilman, thank you for listening to me. Basically, without rehashing everything. What I'm basically asking for is the 1502 Heron, even though the lot looks large, if you would really come and visit the lot, there are a lot of issues with regard to the planting of a tree. 36 inches of a tree is, this much. And on that lot, the reason I took it out was because it was a problem tree. It was an elm tree, Siberian elm, and it had been, on a regular basis dropping limbs. Yesterday's storm would have been a disaster. And I was outside my home actually pruning on getting the snow off my Japanese maple, and I hear this pop and crack and stuff, and I'm looking behind me, and tree very similar to this situation where there's 3 that grew together. We're just dropping limbs like crazy. I have 3 articles in here. I'm not going to share them with you unless you want them, about the problem with Siberian elms. They're brittle. They drop limbs a lot, and they put those seeds all over the place, and you're constantly pulling them out. So even along the river in the paper the other day, they were talking about 3 different kinds of trees that they were pulling out: Siberian elm, those Russian olives, and some others. So they're definitely a problem tree. I love trees. I'm not trying to destroy the city. I've lived here my whole life, and Boise's always been the city of trees. There's plenty of trees, so I'm not really concerned about them being mitigated. But what I did was, after the historical council couldn't come to a decision, and they talked about it for quite a bit, and basically they said, well, can we just bump it up to city, which is what they've done. They didn't want to make a decision on it. But if I did, like in one of the examples earlier, they were talking about putting 2.5-inch caliper trees. Well, if I put 2-inch caliper trees in 36, and I'm going to do 18 trees or even 15 trees on that small lot, that doesn't make any sense. And so that's what I'm dealing with. And then, so anyway, following up the historical council meeting, and I did get an arborist that agreed that the tree had some problems with regard to being power lines running right through it. And my neighbor was complaining about them falling and that kind of thing. So I had, let's see, his name is Michael Andrews, who is a Boise City forester. He came out to my lot and walked the lot with me. And I asked him, give me your thoughts. I wasn't trying to influence him at all about what would seem appropriate. And his recommendation was plant 1 or 2 trees in an area not too far from where that big tree left that was like a class 1, which is a shorter tree. He said maybe in the center area, which I was planning on putting one anyway, maybe a class 2 or class 3, a larger tree. I don't have any problem with that. And then maybe in the front, maybe a class 1 tree, a shorter tree. So I don't have any problem with planting trees at all. It's just that 36 inches of tree is just too much to put in that yard. First off, you can't plant a 36-inch tree. Or, even my understanding is that if you end up with like a 10 or 15-inch tree, it's a struggle. So anyway, that's what I'm asking for, is just the common sense of the referral from Michael Andrews, the Boise City forester. And I think the other thing that I was really taken aback by was, and this may not have anything to do with anything, but when the state got a Christmas tree from Harrison Boulevard without approval, it was a 16-inch tree. And I know after the fact that they planning development or whatever came up with a reason that the tree was too close to the house. But again, it's after the fact. There's another tree just like it on the other side that apparently is going to get donated. But anyway, the point is, he wasn't required in the mitigation to plant a 16-inch tree. The mitigation was plant a tree. And it was the same thing on that 717 19th Street that was disaster that I know that came through to you guys with all those trees. There was at least 120 inches of trees that were cut down. And when it finally settled, based on a recommendation for somebody in city council, plant 7 trees. Nothing about calipers, nothing about anything. So there's just a common sense thing here that just is hard for me to sleep at night, that I'm just struggling with. And so basically, all I'm asking is to follow the directions that were offered by Mike Andrews, that is the city forester, for what I can do to plant trees. And I don't have any problem with that. I'm not trying to create problems. I just want to have some common sense. And I mean, theoretically, like you said, you can plant stuff off-site or other places. But I was listening earlier, it almost sounded like if you have a lot of trees on site, that somehow that can be used as mitigation. I don't understand all the rules exactly, but and I'm sorry I was not aware that I knew there was a historical district, but I didn't know the rules. And the tree service that I used said, nobody really cares about elm trees. Okay, that's fine. So anyway, I don't really have any more to say, but I'm just requesting that we use some common sense and maybe the suggestions, and I did provide these to Josh, that the Boise City Forester has suggested that makes sense for that property. So anyway, that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to respond to you.
Questions? Yes.
Mr. Pulliam, you mostly answered my question, the question that I had for you, which was your backyard is now bare. You're planning to plant some trees. Based on your testimony and your walkthrough with Mr. Andrews, you're already kind of planning to get some plantings.
Right, but I didn't
Okay.
want to do anything until I found out
Yeah.
what I was going to be allowed to do. I mean, for sure, if you actually go to the yard, it definitely needs trees. But maybe along the fence, it should be like class 1 or maybe some nice big bushes or something. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. I've got a new tenant in there now that are good, and I made them aware that we'll be planting some trees, but I just don't think I can plant 36 inches of trees. And the other thing, and again, you were talking about dollars per caliper inch. Again, I was taken aback. First, it cost me $2,800 to get that tree out of there in the first place. And then when the alternative of what kind of contribution that could be made, and I, in my mind, from common sense, now I'm at $500-600, something like that. But then they said, no, it's like $250 per carol per inch, and multiply that, it was like $9,600 contribution. I'm going, that doesn't sound right. That sounds horrible. And then the comment that they made after that was, that seems like a bit much. Maybe we can cut it in half. Well, what are you basing the cut it in half on? I don't get it. So that was kind of hard to deal with. And I mean, you can take this to extremes. What if you have a forest in the backyard and you cut them all down? Are you required to put that forest back? And also what's not considered, I don't think, is in the code is like, what about the growth factor? So if you put in 2.5 inches, they're going to be 40 feet in, 4 or 5 years anyway. So the canopy is going to be protected.
Madam
Anyway,
Mayor.
I didn't mean to rant. I'm sorry. It's just, to be honest with you, this started in October, and every other week I can't sleep because of this whole thing. Anyway.
Madam Mayor, I just hope that the thing that we're learning as a city is if you live in a historic district, just ask permission before you cut down the tree, and it will just save you a ton of headache, as I'm sure you've learned.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think it's something that our city altogether have hopefully learned over the past year with multiple applications.
And I love the city of trees. Like I said, I was born in the old St. Luke's, went to Meridian. It's great, but it's just, I feel like, I guess I should add one more thing, and I know I'm probably out of time, but the neighbors were real upset, and I get it. But there were also a couple of the people, I think one of them was on the historic committee, was very demanding and very pushy. And if you don't stop right now, I'm going to call the police. So they did call the police. Guess what? I had a couple of policemen show up at my house, issue me a certificate, a ticket or whatever, a complaint. And I said, oh, no, what's this, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't tell you where the plate came from, but you're gonna have to go before a judge. I go, okay, so is this just a simple, no, it's a misdemeanor, okay. So I actually did go before a judge like a couple of months later, and he didn't have a clue what this is all about, even after it was explained to him. And they said, well, did you get the certificate of appropriateness? Yes, I did. Send us a picture of the tree you put in the ground. That's all they said. So it was like, okay, one more thing.
Anything further?
Madam Mayor, I do have a question. So Council Member Bajent, I think, brought up a couple of our alternatives earlier, combination of paying and planting and purchasing trees that might be able to be used in some other areas. We do stuff with the City of Trees Challenge in a few other areas. And so the code tells us that we have to replace the 36 inches of caliper trees. So it's pretty clear what our options are. And you mentioned earlier that if it was to be cut down to a different amount, like where does that amount come from? It's somewhat arbitrary. And so it seems to me like we're looking at options of trying to make sure that we are sticking to code, so it's not an arbitrary decision. So if we were able to come up with a cheaper option that wasn't $9,000, but still came to the spot where you were paying for other trees that were going to be planted in other areas, I'm trying to figure out what it is that you're looking for, because you're saying that you don't want an arbitrary number. And we've got some stuff that's written down in city code, and there does have to be some sort of a replacement of these trees. And so I'm trying to figure out what it is that you're asking.
I think probably in my heart, I'm hoping that it would be something similar to the two situations, the Christmas tree and this other thing that happened on 717 North 19th. It was like, again, it was just.
So, and to be clear,
replacement
you're
of a
saying
tree.
the
It was like-
replacement of one tree for one tree is what you're
Yeah, and I
saying?
think on the North 19th, it was 10 to 15 foot trees, if I remember and so doesn't have to do anything with making any payments to any donation of $4,500. It does, it's just plant some trees and get them going.
Okay.
That's all I was hoping for.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is anybody from Nina here? Right. Is anybody here to testify on this? Any further questions for the applicant or for Josh?
Madam Mayor, I have a question for Josh. I want to clarify the code section, and I'm looking for it now and somehow I can't find it, but my memory in reading and preparing for tonight was that the code does say that if a tree is removed and there's not sufficient evidence that it was diseased, that it has to be replaced with the equivalent caliper inch, or there was an or in it, and I can't remember what that is, the judgment of the city forester.
Yeah.
And could you point me to the page? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I can't find it.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg. So the ordinance states it's slightly different than that. It says that for healthy, desirable trees, they shall be mitigated in equal caliper inches, or, and I've got the language in the report here, or a donation made equal to the value of planting those equal calipers to the city tree fund.
Okay. And then remind me, my memory of the situation on 19th Street was that in addition to planting the trees, there was also a required donation there. Am I misremembering?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I believe you're correct. I was not personally involved in that case, but I could certainly do some quick research and find out, but I believe you're correct.
Okay. And the spruce tree on Harrison did not come before us, so we wouldn't have had any play in that one. Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Yes.
Madam Mayor, one more question of the applicant. Sorry to make you come back up here, but I can talk while you're walking up. So my question is, do you understand that in addition, that it can be a combination, that in addition to planting the 10 to 20 caliper inches that you could plant with the recommendation of the city forester, then you could donate the difference and or donate trees to actually get planted in sites that the city forester identifies on public land that would equal the rest. In other words, you don't have to make the whole donation one way or the other.
I do understand that. Yes.
Okay,
I think that one of the words that you just read or Josh just read was desirable trees. I think that maybe some emphasis on that would be, it wasn't desirable for me, and
thank you.
Siberian elms are not desirable trees. If
Appreciate
that's the
that.
case, then does that alter what you're asking?
Thank you. Anything further? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this.
Madam Mayor, I don't know if I'll get support for this because it's hard to know, but I'm going to make the motion that we deny the appeal of the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of the appeal of DAR H 21-00510 at 501 West Heron and require the applicant the appellant to either replace the caliper inches on site or donate an equivalent of those caliper inches or some combination thereof.
Second.
Madam Mayor. I think one of the things we have to figure out first is whether the tree was healthy or whether there was sufficient evidence, whether there was not sufficient evidence that the tree was unhealthy. Because if we think there was sufficient evidence that the tree was unhealthy, then we reverse. So that's like the threshold question for me. And we have the applicant's testimony and his belief. I looked at the photos, and some of the photos of the cut tree, particularly the branches, showed heart rot. There's no contradictory testimony that it wasn't dropping branches, breaking, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the threshold question is, was there insufficient evidence that the tree was unhealthy? And I think it's close, and I'm kind of inclined to, in this close call, probably say it wasn't healthy. And so I'm inclined to find error there and then use that as a starting point, particularly because we know, I guess we take it on good faith from the applicant that he's planning on doing a ton of mitigation anyway.
Yep, Madam Mayor. So my thinking here is that we don't have sufficient evidence that it was unhealthy because it was cut down without a permit. And if it would have gone through the proper channels, we would have been able to know 100% for sure. And if we're looking at any sort of precedent of how we might move forward in the future, it would still give us that argument that go ahead and just cut that tree down as soon as possible. And that's going to be your easiest way to not have to mitigate something in the future, which is similar to a conversation that we've had a couple of times since we've been up here. And, I think that that's one of the things that I want to be really hesitant of, is that we make sure that there is the stick behind doing things the right way. And if things are continued to do things the wrong way, we can't just continue to make exceptions. I think that there may be some opportunities for that price to be reduced significantly. I think there may be opportunities within the City of Trees Challenge to potentially even purchase trees that aren't even planted that can be given away. As long as those caliper inches are being replaced, which we see in city code, I think we have the ability to reduce what looks like a pretty large number, but based off of city code and based off of the way that things were handled in the incorrect manner, it's hard for me to say that the tree was one way or the other. And so it's hard for me to make that assumption.
Madam Mayor, if I can just quickly clarify, I completely agree. And I think I'm the person who said, what's the rule going to be? You just cut down a tree and get away with it, right? There's one photo of a chunk of branch that shows heart rot. And that's entirely what I'm basing it on, because absent that photo, I'm right there with you. And I can even be persuaded on that.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. So, I appreciate what Councilmember Bajan is saying, although I would note that on large mature trees, there's often a branch or two that has some issues. That doesn't mean the whole tree is unhealthy. And so for me, there wasn't sufficient evidence that the tree was unhealthy to make that finding. And I think we are at a point where folks are working the system, if you will, whether this was on purpose in this case or not. There certainly are contractors who are aware of the rules and are still breaking them because they think they can. And in some cases, probably duping some of our citizens in doing that. And I don't know how to change that except for to get tough. And sometimes, that doesn't feel good. Certainly, frankly, it doesn't feel good here, except that I will note that if we reverse and uphold the appeal, then we're taking on good faith that this resident is going to plant some trees. And I guess I would like to believe that that's true, but I'm not, it's just not something that our code supports, frankly, or that I can support. I agree with Councilmember Halliburton that in this case, there is, in knowing the city forester as well as I do, I think a lot of opportunity for this resident to work with the city forester to figure out how to mitigate in a way that won't be nearly as costly as was first estimated, especially if the resident is planning to plant trees on site, and those trees will be counted against that mitigation. So for all those reasons, I made this motion. It's, I think at some point we have to figure out how to ensure that people think that we're serious about these rules. And I hate for it to be one person that ends up being the one where that line is drawn, but somewhere you have to.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I can feel that it's a painful decision for all of us because I think we've all been there. And for those of us who have been the one, I just think about my mom telling me growing up, no one's going to take care of Elizabeth except for Elizabeth, which was her way of saying the buck stops with you. And it concerns me that the appellant was referring to these other cases. If we do not uphold this code now, there will be a fourth person coming before us referring to yet another example of us shying away from the hard decisions. And so first of all, I thank the council president for making the difficult motion. And for that reason, I will support it because I think it's why we created it. And it is painful to look at that number when we calculate it, but there is a reason. It's so that we can stand behind this code and have it mean something so that there will not be a fourth person coming before us with this same issue.
Madam Mayor. I think this application or this appeal gives me heartburn because I think that Historic Preservation Commission used their expertise and they applied code as it should have been applied. So I don't think, I agree with the council president that we should not approve the appeal. However, to me, the mitigation is a little bit cloudy and maybe a little bit excessive for what needs to happen. And I agree with the city forester who visited the appellant in those more appropriate mitigation measures for the removal of the tree. And so I guess I'm kind of in the middle here. Like, I don't think that we should uphold the appeal, but also I feel like the mitigation feels excessive and that the city forester's expertise could be used in this situation to require the homeowner to mitigate and hold some accountability and also provide for some future caliper inches, maybe not 36 right off the bat, but at some point it would get there. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Madam Mayor, I've been persuaded, particularly by Councilmember Sanchez and Halliburton.
And I would just respond to Councilmember Woodings, and I understand where you're coming from. I'm not convinced that the city forester was being asked to rule on whether this was sufficient mitigation for the historic preservation decision. He was being asked to rule on what kind of trees could go in this lot. And so I think that it is an appropriate amount of trees for the lot. And I think I would encourage the applicant to plant those. But our code is pretty clear that it says if you can't find that the tree was unhealthy, then you have to replace with caliper inch. And maybe it shouldn't be that clear. Maybe we should have some discretion, but I don't see discretion there.
Mayor, I forgot to mention that part too. Without having seen the tree standing, it's really hard to make that determination. I used to live where I would sleep with my head 5 feet from a Siberian elm. Did that feel great? No, like never, especially during a windstorm. They're not great trees. And I don't think that we really have standards that are real clear in our city, what makes a desirable tree and what makes a tree undesirable, what makes a tree healthy and not potentially causing harm to life and property and what doesn't. So without seeing this one standing, which would have been the proper way, it's really hard to make that determination. But I also don't know that there's sufficient evidence that it was healthy and wasn't going to cause damage. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that. And I realized that the city forester wasn't looking at it with that lens, but that's kind of our job sometimes to look at it with that lens. Like, is this sufficient mitigation? I think so. I don't know.
Ben Mayor, I do
I
have
think-
one more just additional comment, and this really is more of a comment. I understand that neighbors may not know that some of these requirements are in place. People who cut down the trees should know. They're professionals. And I guess I would encourage the appellant to talk with these folks because they absolutely should know. And I don't know what sort of measures we have in place to address this as well, but it's as much as experience as it takes to cut down that large of a tree. You should know what the rules are and where to go. And so if that's something that we need to address as well to prevent this from happening, I think that that's an additional step for us.
Councilmember, I think that that's a very good point, was thinking the same thing, and much in the same way that we were asked to provide training to builders who work in the historic district that are listed as folks that are experienced there. But I was just on the City of Boise page earlier this week looking at tree stuff. And there's a listing, when I was looking for an arborist, there's a listing through the City of Boise of arborists. If those people are listed, they should know. And I do believe that there's something there from, yes, the buck stops here at the homeowner, but yes, it also ought to stop in some way at those who are experienced tree cutters, especially those that are listed on our website as being licensed or having done something to get listed on the City of Boise website. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
No.
Woodings,
No.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
4 in favor, 2 opposed, motion carries.
All right. With that, there's nothing else on the agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, I don't vote. We are adjourned.